When Jesus heard that Herod Antipas put John the Baptist in prison, I believe Jesus could see the writing on the wall. John the Baptist was publicly pointing out that Herod's marriage to Herodias was a sinful marriage. Herodias left her husband Philip to marry Philip's brother, Herod Antipas. So Herod Antipas sinfully married his brother's wife, and John the Baptist was publicly pointing this out. John the Baptist was publicly calling Herod and Herodias to repent. John was clearly passionate about not letting people be influenced by Herod and Herodias following the sinful desires of their heart, by making it as clear as the Jordan River, that Herod's marriage to Herodias was a product of their sin. John the Baptist was brave. John the Baptist was very brave to publicly expose Herod's marriage to Herodias as a sinful marriage, despite knowing that there would be dangerous consequences. It was clear that John the Baptist was someone who put God first. It was clear that John's devotion to God was greater than his fear of what someone like Herod Antipas would do to him. Jesus himself said that among those born of women, there was no one greater than John the Baptist. Jesus said that John was like a lamp that burned and gave light. Jesus said that John was a light. John was a light because he publicly pointed people towards God. And a part of that meant John publicly pointed out the sin that turned people away from God, even if that sin was committed by powerful people like Herod Antipas. Jesus himself said to his followers, "Do not be afraid of those who can kill your body." And in the eyes of Jesus, John the Baptist was like a lamp that burned and gave light. But in the eyes of Herod and Herodias, John the Baptist had publicly disgraced them, and for this John the Baptist was put in prison. When Jesus heard that John the Baptist had been put into prison, I believe that Jesus knew that John's death was inevitable. I believe that Jesus grieved, knowing that John's death was inevitable. How did Jesus know that John's death was inevitable? Well, I'm glad you asked. So we're looking at Matthew chapter 4, verse 12. We're looking at the life of Jesus through Matthew's gospel. But I think it's going to be very interesting and very important to have a look at something in John's gospel. Now, just so we don't get confused, just so no one gets confused, we've been talking about John the Baptist, who was baptizing people and pointing people to God, and he was put into prison by Herod Antipas. That's John the Baptist. Now, John's gospel was written by a disciple of Jesus named John, and John's gospel is the last gospel about the life of Jesus, the last biography about the life of Jesus, a beautiful biography. And in John chapter 2, verse 24 and 25, it says that Jesus he knew all people. He did not need any testimony about mankind, for he knew what was in each person. So essentially, he knew what was in people's hearts. So John chapter 2, verse 24 and 25 say that Jesus knew all people. He knew each person. He knew what was in each person. Essentially, he knew what was in people's hearts. Okay? Then John chapter 3, verse 23, it says that John the Baptist was baptizing in Enon near Salim. And then verse 24, the next verse, it says that this happened when John was baptizing in Enon near Salim. This happened before John was put into prison by Herod Antipas. So, from this, we can use some Sherlock Holmes deductive skills. We can deduce that everything in John chapter 2 to John chapter 3, verse 24, all of that happened before Matthew chapter 4, verse 12. Because Matthew chapter 4, verse 12 is when Jesus heard that John the Baptist had been put into prison by Herod Antipas. And then everything in John chapter 2 to John chapter 3, verse 24, that all happened before John had been put into prison. So this means we can use the verse, what is said in John chapter 2 verse 24 and 25. We can apply what is said in those verses to what's happening in Matthew chapter 4 verse 12. John chapter 2 verse 24 and 25, it says that Jesus knew all people and he knew what was in each person. So we can apply that to what's happening in Matthew chapter 4 verse 12. When Jesus heard that John had been put into prison, I believe Jesus knew that John's death was inevitable. So to summarize, Jesus becomes aware that John the Baptist has been imprisoned by Herod Antipas. And Jesus is aware that Herod has imprisoned John because he was prompted to by his wife Herodias. And because John's gospel says that Jesus knew all people, he knew what was in each person. Jesus knew the sin and darkness in the hearts of Herod and Herodias. And because he knew the sin and darkness in their hearts, Jesus knew that John's death was inevitable. And Jesus grieved knowing that John's death was inevitable. And I believe the intensity of Jesus' grief for the inevitability of John's death, the intensity of his grief for John, led to the intensity of Jesus' pursuit for God's plans and purposes for his life. The way Jesus' heart broke for the inevitability of John's death, the way Jesus' heart broke for John, led Jesus to turn to the heart of his Father in heaven. No one's heart resembled the heart of our Father in heaven more than the heart of Jesus. Jesus' heart perfectly resembled the heart of our Father in heaven. And because of this, Jesus was the light that perfectly resembled God's light. And this is why Jesus would be the light that would shine in the darkness of this world. And we're going to explore that next time.